So I'm standing here on the lanai of our own house, overlooking the farm and the ocean 4.5 miles away. And I want to tell you what makes Kona coffee as famous as it is. Kona coffee is considered the best coffee in the world, or at least one of the best coffees in the world. It's known as the champagne of coffees, and there are good reasons for that. Any coffee needs to have two components of the highest quality. One is growing conditions, and the other one is processing methods. So growing conditions first. Growing conditions here in Kona are absolutely ideal. We are on the western slopes of Hualalai volcano behind us, and of Mauna Loa volcanoes, and the western slopes are the northernmost coffee growing region in the world. That is to say that even at sea level in Kona, we have sun angle and weather conditions that are comparable to coffee growing regions elsewhere in the world, much closer to the equator at much higher elevations. I have been told, for instance, that the best coffee from Jamaica comes from 3,000 feet all the way up to 5,000 or even higher, and so it is in many other coffee growing regions. Our best coffee here is grown between about 1,700 feet and 2,500 feet or so, and you just have to look at the last 10 years. All of the competitions were won by farms in roughly that area, and that's because, again, in the higher elevations, coffee grows more slowly, the beans get larger, which is important for the quality of coffee, and the beans get denser, which is more important for the quality of coffee. So back to growing conditions. The single most important component that makes Kona coffee so good is our soil. Coffee must have well-drained soil, and our mineral-rich lava soil is absolutely ideal. Here on this farm, I may have 2 or 3 inches of soil and a few more inches maybe of cinder, and then there may be a rock. And when I planted, I had 3,000 holes punched to crack the rock, because coffee has an all-important taproot. It needs to grow straight down. If the taproot jays within a couple of years, the tree will suffer and eventually die. So it's very important that the taproot of the coffee is happy. Other growing conditions include that coffee must have 40 to 60 inches of rain per year, ideally, which we don't get here. But I have 2 separate irrigation systems with a 30,000 gallon tank and a 12,000 gallon tank, and I can deliver the water to the trees when they need it and as much as they need it. I collect every drop of rainwater, and I also have access to county water, which I pump up 350 feet. And so that's water. Coffee also needs a dormant period with shorter days and cooler nights. That's here between November and February or so, and during that time there also needs to be a period of 6 weeks or so with very little rain, so that the coffee can go through its natural cycle. Other growing conditions that you often hear about is coffee that's shade grown, and here in Kona that depends on the elevation. Coffee evolved in the jungle canopies of Ethiopia, and so in elevations where you have much more heat, you have to grow coffee in shade trees. So a lot of times in farms under 1,200 feet, coffee is grown around macadamia nuts or avocado or what have you, different kinds of shade trees, and they're clustered. There are very few farms that really have their trees planted in rows the way I do. The reason that I don't need shade at this elevation is the weather. There are approximately 9 different types of climate zones in the world, and 7 of them are represented on this island. So when you come and visit, you can never answer a question, well, so how is the weather in Hawaii? Well, your answer should always be what island, what side, what elevation. For instance, here I have 36, 38 inches of rain per year, and down there by the airport, only 4.5 miles away, they have, what, less than 10, 8 inches of rain. 30, 40 miles this way, they may have 60 and 70 inches of rain. On the other side of the island in Hilo, the dark side of the island, they have 120 to 200 inches of rain. So it very much depends on where you are. And part of our climate pattern above 1400 feet is that in the mornings we frequently have blue sky, as we do today, and then in the afternoon, pretty much every afternoon, it's overcast, and that's our natural shade. So I want all the sun I can get, and that's why I planted my trees that far apart. You can tell who's done his homework and who has not. At this elevation, trees should not be closer than 6 feet or so. You don't get more yield from more trees. You get more yield from more sunlight and more nutrients and all of that. And of course, there are some other things pertaining to organic growing. The basic premise of organic growing is that you do everything to feed the soil, and then the soil feeds the trees or the plants, and not the other way around. If you have chemical fertilizers, it's like putting a kid on a sugar diet. You feed the trees directly, but you do nothing for the soil, and aside from all the poisons and residues and remnants that can be in the food. So we do everything organic. We use organic feather meal and various compounds, microbial soil inoculators such as EM and so on, that transform the minerals in the soil into a format that can be more easily taken up by the plants. And the two irrigation systems I have are both sort of overhead, because I don't want drip irrigation. Drip irrigation in this kind of soil would form an onion of moisture, and the roots want to stay there. I want my roots to go everywhere. In fact, I want the roots to shake hands across the 12 feet, and so I want everything wet. And yes, it's more expensive, and I would not have been able to do all of these different projects without the help of NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, a department of the Federal Department of Agriculture. They are wonderful, and I have gone through many different practices, including mulching the farm and planting cover crops, 4 different types of grasses, putting a hog wire fence around it to keep the wild pigs from destroying my water lines, and so on and so on. And I'm also working closely with the Kona District Soil and Water Conservation District, and in fact they honored us by making us Cooperator of the Year for 2008, and I'm very proud, and I have a big sign to prove it, that they actually gave us this honor. So we are doing everything to protect the soil, to protect the water, and to keep our trees happy.